there folks, welcome to the channel. I'm glad you can make it. In today's episode, we're going to be modifying the industrial pump for the Stay Fresh freeze dryer. This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time because currently, and it's not that big a deal, but currently you need an Allen wrench to both release the drain valve and to open the plug to add oil. I would like it to where I don't need any tools whatsoever, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how we did it. Let's get started. So when you want to change your oil on the industrial pump, you're going to need a hex key or an Allen wrench, and it comes with your freeze dryer. This is the setup for my pump. You have a spot here at the top where you remove the cap and you insert the oil, and then you have a spot here at the bottom where you remove the plug, and that's where you drain out the oil. So let me just do that very quickly. And what I've noticed is that it comes out pretty strong depending on how full it is, especially if it's nice and hot. Right now the oil is cold for this demonstration, but you'll get the idea. So I like to hold the cup directly underneath the drain plug and then very carefully remove the plug while the cup is directly under it. Otherwise it can splash out all over the place and cause an oily mess. If you've changed your oil once or twice, you probably already know what I'm talking about. And even as the oil level starts to, drain out and it gets lower in the vacuum pump, that stream will start to recede. So you have to really be cognizant as to where you place your cup or whatever's catching the oil. Okay, so we're completely drained. And now let's make a valve that doesn't require any tools when it comes to changing the oil. The first thing we need to look at is the plug itself. This plug is a G3/8 plug, formerly known as the BSPP or the British Standard Pipe Thread Parallel. Basically, this refers to the threading on the end of that plug. A different type of connection is an NPT connection, or a National Pipe Thread Tapered. And while technically you could screw an NPT connection into your vacuum pump, it won't fit just right. It's not going to screw in all the way, and it could cause leaks and screw up the threading on your vacuum pump. So what I wanted to do was find an exact fitting for what we currently had. These are the three pieces that I ended up buying on Amazon, starting with the adapter. This adapter is exactly like the plug that we removed from the vacuum pump. It's a G3/8 inch male. On the other side, we have an NPT 3/8 inch female. And by using this adapter, we can now use NPT connections, which are more common and readily available. Like this stainless steel valve, this screws on with no problem. Now, I could stop right there, but when I open the valve, the oil is going to come shooting out, and it's going to be similar to what we experience currently. So what I chose to do was just add a very simple elbow or 90-degree angle, which gives me a spigot and a perfect flow directly down into the cup. No problems there. One thing you do need to be aware of is that this spot here, which connects to the pump, and this spot here, which connects to the valve, are potential leak points. It's not going to be that big a deal because it's not under pressure, but we will need to shore that up somehow, and there are a couple different ways to do that. This particular adapter came with a bonded sealing washer, and that's what this is right here. And under normal circumstances, this would be perfect. You wouldn't need to do anything else. The only problem is that it's a little too big, and I'll show you in a minute how it doesn't quite fit. If it were a little smaller, though, it would be perfect. So in this particular case, we're not going to use it. Another option is to use Teflon tape. Right here, we've got yellow Teflon tape, which is rated for steel pipes, petroleum, oil, gas, things like that. But you could also use white Teflon tape if you want. The temperature rating for Teflon tape is something like 500 or 600 degrees, so you don't have to worry about the heat from the oil interfering with the tape. If you don't like Teflon tape, you could add a little washer and just make sure it's not too big, and then come back with an O-ring and just make sure, once again, it's not too big. And what you're basically doing is you're kind of creating one of these right here. So you're just kind of making your own. Once you put your washer in and your O-ring, and then you connect everything together, and remember, you have to do it for both of these pieces, you will have a nice tight seal that will keep any leaks from happening. But we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be using Teflon tape. And the reason I like using Teflon tape for this specific application is because that Teflon tape is going to provide a little resistance when we tighten everything up. And that's going to make it easier when it comes time to position the components so that they're all lined up properly. So that's the only reason, and you'll see how I do it here in a minute. We're going to do 4 complete rotations clockwise. Once I'm done, I'm just going to stretch it, and then with my hands, I'm just going to wrap it into the threads. I do want to make sure that the hole is not obstructed in any way, and it looks like we're good with that piece. Okay, now let's do the valve, and we're going to do the exact same thing. 4 complete clockwise rotations on the valve, and then once again, ensuring that the hole is not obstructed in any way. That looks perfect. And what I'm going to do here is just go ahead and connect the adapter to the valve. You can connect it all on the vacuum pump itself, but I find it easier to just have it pre-connected, and then we're just going to install the entire assembly. So notice that I have still a little bit of space between the valve and the adapter. I'm going to take a wrench and just tighten that up until I cannot tighten it anymore. So we're just going to get that as tight as possible. And there we go. Perfect. So the first part is set up. And like I said at the beginning, you could leave it just like that, but what we are going to do is add this little piece. And technically speaking, you don't need to add any Teflon tape to that little elbow because this isn't really a leak area that you need to worry about. But I like to add Teflon tape to this particular point because, like I said earlier, it does provide enough resistance so that when we screw that elbow onto the valve, we are able to have a tight fitting and then position it in the direction that we want. For this piece, I'm only going to do 2 complete clockwise rotations, so it really isn't necessary to do 4. I'm going to make sure that my hole isn't obstructed. Very good. And now we're going to connect it. And you'll see what I'm talking about right here. So notice that I'm starting to get a little resistance, and that's because of the Teflon tape. And as it gets tighter, I'm just going to grab a wrench and spin that spigot until it is pointing directly down. And there we have it. That's exactly the way it should look by the time you're finished. Everything is linear. We have our valve directly on top, very easy to open and close. And then we have that spigot pointing directly down. All that's left is to screw this onto the vacuum pump and we are good. Let me take this moment to show you why we can't use the bonded sealing washer. And that's because this is inset a little bit. So notice that that bonded sealing washer is just a little bit bigger than the hole itself. If it were to fit in perfectly, this would be the solution. You would not need Teflon tape, but because it doesn't, we are using Teflon tape. Okay, there we go. I am going to go ahead and start to screw that in, and immediately I can feel that resistance, which is what I'm looking for. But notice how we still have Teflon tape visible where the adapter meets the pump. We're going to go ahead and continue to screw that until we get it nice and tight, and the spigot is pointing downwards. And we are just about there. Absolutely perfect, very tight fit, and this is precisely where you want to be at this point. The adapter is tightly screwed in and inset, everything is lined up perfectly. And then you've got the spigot pointing down. You could put a hose there if you want, but totally not necessary. All that's left for us to do is to close the valve and then fill it up with oil. Oil level is at 50% and our drain valve is currently closed. If we were to open that valve, we would have an oily mess all over the place. Notice we don't have any leaks where the vacuum meets the adapter or the adapter meets the valve, and that's absolutely perfect. And this little section right here, if you want to remove any of that excess Teflon tape just to clean it up a little bit, you can totally do that because the work is already done. I'm going to slide this a little closer to the edge of the table so that we can see it in action. And when my pump is running, normally this section is just off of the shelf that it's at. So all I do is put a cup down and then open the valve. One hand. Perfect. And there we go. Oil coming out. No problem there. Looks absolutely beautiful. The one thing I will say is that with this type of setup, your oil is going to drain out a little bit slower. Now, it will be faster when the oil is hot, but it's still not going to be as fast as if you were to just open the plug and it comes pouring out. With that being said, I'm talking maybe an additional 45 seconds to a minute. It's honestly not that big a deal. After the oil's done draining, you will want to tilt the pump just a little bit to get any excess oil or moisture that's out of the pump, and then of course you can just close your valve. Let's finish the video off by looking at this one final piece. This is the plug for the top where we add our oil. Currently it still needs an Allen wrench, and I'd like to be able to change the oil without using any tools. And I do believe that the newer pumps don't have that top. They actually have a screw top that you can undo with your hand, but in my particular case, because I have an older pump, mine does require the Allen wrench. So here's what we're going to do. I am going to cut this Allen wrench here, and then I'm going to shorten it right about here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to insert it into that plug and then use some sort of epoxy or something like that and basically create some sort of a handle. This is what it now looks like after I finished cutting it and rounding the edges a little bit so they weren't sharp. And I did go ahead and mark it so that it would be positioned in a very specific way on the vacuum pump, but this is basically what it's going to look like. Let's go ahead and get a 2-part epoxy, and this is probably 100% overkill. You could more than likely just use super glue, I would imagine, but in this case I had 2-part epoxy, and that's what we're going to be using. We're going to give that a quick mix to incorporate both of those parts. And now we're just going to glue those together. So notice I made a little black dot on the Allen wrench, and there's a little black dot on the plug, and that's to let me know which direction I wanted it to be aligned in. Very good. So all we've done right here is put the Allen wrench into the hole with the epoxy on it. Right now I'm just smoothing out the sides. I don't want any of the epoxy, on the side of the cap or on the threads. So it's just going to be on the top. I'm going to leave it there to cure for 20 to 30 minutes, and 20 to 30 minutes have now passed. This is perfectly set up. It's nice and dry. Let's put this onto our vacuum pump and see if it works as a decent handle. All right, so right now we're going to screw it on. Nice rotations. Absolutely beautiful. And notice that the final position heads towards the back. That's the way I wanted it. You can position yours in any way you want. Just make sure you make a little mark on the Allen wrench and the plug so that you can glue it in properly. And to unscrew, no problem either. All right, guys, there you have it. That's how we built the oil drain valve assembly for the standard industrial pump on the Stay Fresh freeze dryer. Matter of fact, I built a second one exactly the same, using the exact same parts, and it's currently on my Mega. So the parts are compatible, and I'll put a link to where I got them either in the description box or in the first comment. I will say that the parts are probably a little overkill. I mean, these are solid stainless steel parts. You could probably go with something a little bit cheaper like brass, but I like the look of stainless steel. It is super heavy duty, and I don't think we're going to be having any problems anytime soon with this assembly. And to top it off, we did fix the plug at the top by cutting the Allen wrench, putting it in the plug, and then adding some epoxy. Now we don't need a tool to change the oil for our vacuum pump. And that to me is just like one of those little things that enhances the experience. If you happen to be getting a newer Stay Fresh, there's a decent chance that your plug will be a black plug, in which case you can unscrew it, so you wouldn't have to do this particular fix. But if you do happen to have an older unit, this is definitely something that's pretty easy to do, especially if you add a valve on the bottom. Let me know if you have any questions. Drop them in the comment section. And if you want any information on the Stay Fresh freeze dryer, I'll put a link to their company in the description box below. They've been kind enough to offer a discount code so that when you make your purchase, you could save a couple bucks off your order. We've also just started a group on Facebook for people who are looking to buy a freeze dryer or who maybe already own a Stay Fresh freeze dryer and they're wanting to get the most out of it. I'll put a link to that Facebook group in the description box below as well. If you like this video and you want to see more videos like it, hit that thumbs up button. And if you are not currently subscribed, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single one of our uploads. Thanks a lot for joining us. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.